The air tasted of ozone and the metallic tang of burned circuitry, a flavor nothing on this insignificant sphere had ever known. I remember the precise moment the sky didn't just darken, but folded, like a sheet of cheap brittle fabric collapsing in on itself. For millennia, we had cataloged this planet, this vibrant, teeming mess of biomass and mineral wealth, from the sterile perfection of the observation vessel. Our initial scans had promised an effortless harvest, a resource-rich nursery awaiting the careful pruning of our superior intellect. We had underestimated the persistent animal stubbornness of the dominant species, the bipedal remnants you cataloged as humans. Our arrival was an assertion. This harvester hung above the troposphere, a wedge of obsidian metal that seemed to drink the sun's light, radiating an oppressive cold that crept through the ship's hull and settled deep into the marrow of my bones.
My designation, Vexor, was predicated on unmatched tactical acuity. I was the finest instrument of the Kryll Empire, trained to view planetary life not as an ecosystem, but as a ledger of exploitable assets. I watched the designated primary landing zone, a sprawling, temperate coastline rich with geothermal vents and rare superconducting crystalline formations. The preliminary cultural assessment had been dismissive. Primitives, volatile, scattered, predictable, priced on display. She was beautiful, in the way a perfectly calibrated threat display full. Sharp angles, iridescent synthetic skin that shifted color based on emotional readouts, currently holding a flat, unwavering emerald tone.
Atmosphere composition nominal, Commander. Trace amounts of complex airborne particulates, suggesting industrial activity. Seismic activity minimal, though we are registering unusual, localized energies emanating from the landmass's interior. Unusual? Specify the nature of the anomaly, Lyra. Is it pre-existing geothermal bleed or prior the atmospheric dispersal units? Initiate the low-frequency resonance pulse. We will keep the initial contact non-lethal. Observationally, we need the leaders compliant, not panicked. The crystalline deposits cannot wait for a massacre. The harvester began its slow, terrifying descent. Through the main viewport, the earth bloomed below, a vibrant, sickeningly beautiful marble of blues and greens. I adjusted the magnification, sweeping across the continental shelves. The human presence was notable, dense in certain pockets, clustered around waterways and resource nodes. They built flimsy, haphazard structures covered in the sticky residue of burning hydrocarbons. They smelled, even through the filtration systems, of wood smoke, sweat, and something uniquely sweet and decay. The smell of unrestrained life, the feeling, the present decitive, is rados, handeries, a fourth of Cayman changes, the comments of the present, the usugrays of the presence, these equivalents in Rayo bro.
It was at that exact moment, during the calculated methodical descent into engineered compliance, that the first anomaly registered on the forward tactical scanners. Commander, Lyra's voice suddenly cracked, beyond flickering once, a jarring shade of slate gray. It was designed to gently disrupt the neural pathways of complex organisms, inducing a state of deep, non-traumatic confusion. A temporary manageable incapacitation detected. Origin point, decentralized. Origin vectors are multiple, approaching from divergent lateral angles. A reverse Chaudhry analysis intakes terribly stuttered unvolatives. Density signature suggests composite materials, organic cores encased in highly compressed mineral matrices. Preliminary trajectory analysis indicates terralist examples and sixtrative velocities. Density signature suggests composite materials, or cores encased in highly compressed mineral matrices. Preliminary trajectory analysis indicates our intent, a concept we cataloged only in the highest forms of organized malice or genius. My focus snapped out the viewport.
The ground, which should have been falling into the prescribed wave of induced unconsciousness, was suddenly violently interrupted. There was a sound that defied the physics of warfare I was accustomed to. It wasn't the deep, concussive thump of kinetic ordnance, nor the sharp whine of plasma discharge. It was a series of wet, percussive, a why and stabilizer with the force of a meteorite. It didn't spark, didn't vaporize. It splintered against the energy dampeners, kicking up a shower of superheated, pulverized rock that smelled acrid and shockingly hot. I stared, my composure dissolving like smoke in a high wind. What in the void? I whispered, the word alien on my tongue, inadequate. The velocity vectors exceed local ballistic norms by a factor of 5. The material composition suggests natural stone, but the kinetic transfer is guided. The velocity vectors exceed local ballistic norms by a factor of 5. The material composition suggests natural stone, but the kinetic transfer is guided. Her visor shuddered violently. The energy shields designed to deflect asteroid fragments and early-stage orbital defense platforms flared violently, bathing the interior of the vessel in a sick, oscillating green light. The air pressure dropped momentarily, making my suit seals whine in protest. The impact rate did not diminish. It only changed pattern, as the initial barrage was immediate and profound. The internal viewports, designed to give us panoramic views of conquest, were suddenly speckled with glowing impact points. Small, perfectly circular dents that spoke of immense, focused force. Commander, Lyra's voice was now barely audible, strained by the system strain. The energy expenditure required for this level of coordinated attack, especially given the material origin, suggests advanced, localized technology, or a biological adaptation we have never modeled. And the missiles, the projectiles, were unquestionably stones. But these were not pebbles picked up by careless hands. These were softball-sized chunks of igneous rock, perfectly weighted and thrown with a rotational velocity that should have required integrated magnetic launch platforms. A profound, icy cold realization washed over me, settling deep into my core processing unit, far colder than the ship's ambient temperature regulators. We had prepared for plasma weaponry, for orbital bombardment, for chemical warfare. We had never factored in the sheer infuriating efficiency of primal physics prius. Chimal Vinus is the predicate in the viewport, a man, judging by the heavy oil-stained leather strapping across his torso. He wasn't aiming at the armor plating nor the engine housings. He wasn't even looking at the point of greatest weakness. He was aiming at the primary optical sensor cluster, the very eye that allowed us to perceive the world. The stone left his arm, leaving a blur of brown and gray. It struck the reinforced crystal covering the main optical unit with a sickening crunch. The impact didn't breach the shielding, but it sent a shockwave through the viewing array, causing the internal illumination to flicker wildly in the room in nauseating stroboscopic bursts of red and green. Shields down to 90% capability, a junior officer shouted, his voice tight with panic. Maintain power distribution to the shields, I commanded, though my mind felt like it was running on outdated firmware. Lyra, analyze the residue of the impact sites. Focus on the launch mechanics. How are they achieving that velocity without discernible motive force? Beyond missile tension.
Then she breathed out a sound that was less analysis and more raw intellectual horror. Commander, she finally whispered, they are utilizing the natural resonance frequencies of the local substrate. They are not just throwing stones, they are using the Earth itself as a focusing lens. They are amplifying the kinetic energy through the material medium before projection. It is a localized, non-technological energy transfer. It defies our standard physics models for organic application. The first mystery solved swiftly and brutally. They weren't just throwing stones, they were weaponizing geology, and they were doing it with a level of understanding that suggested eons of focused observational study. Where they're weaponizing geology, and they were doing it with a level of understanding that suggested eons of focused observational study.
Target the visible sources of the impacts. We will establish a clear kill radius. We are exiting the tactical sweep, birthing centurated beings, targeting the thing differences of the impacts. We will establish a clear kill radius. We are exiting the tactical sweep. No special rattling climb away from the perceived danger. Below us, the barrage did not stop. As we gained altitude, the sound shifted. The frantic, rhythmic, the whack, the rank of impact gave way to a deep, resonant drumming. It was coming from the water, from the hidden estuaries and inlets bordering our approach path. It was the sound of organized that target the visible sources of the impacts. We will establish a cannonballs but etched one to think to it back and possible. These objects were traveling with a dreadful, steady trajectory, forcing us into a sharp, evasive banking maneuver that nearly tore the ventral stabilizers from their mounts. What are those materials? I roared, leaning forward, gripping the console edge.
A stream of superheated ionizing plasma streamed out from the ship's flanks, designed to sterilize the area to make the ground uninhabitable for any repeat attack. The plasma washed over the clustered positions. Where it hit, the jungle didn't just burn, it instantly desiccated, turning to brittle, smoking ash that rained down onto the pristine coastal soil. The expected result was panic. The demanded Myra's fingers flew across her interface, the earlier panic replaced by absolute feverish concentration. It's a focused counter-frequency, Commander? A biological counter-frequency. It is designed to disrupt the coherent energy pattern of the plasma discharge itself. They are utilizing pattern vocalization to destabilize our weaponry. The alien military doctrine, which had prepared me for chemical, thermal, or brute kinetic assault, was rendered useless by a sound. A complex, evolved biological noise that countered the stones and the disruptive hum of the unknown counter-frequency.
The silence, punctuated only by the ringing echoes of failed energy discharges, was louder than any explosion. The realization was sickening. This species had not merely survived on resource scavenging, they had evolved to understand the forces around them, to weaponize their very environment. My focus shifted to the source of the counterfrequency. It seemed to emanate from a single point, a small elevated bluff overlooking the estuary, the epicenter of the defiance, real, defiance, and chronically to a grosjery. The epicenter of the defiance real, a steady, rhythmic beating. Was the sound of drumming real? This time the attack was immediate and coordinated. The projectiles were no longer crude stones, they were hardened, projectile-tipped darts, fired with frightening accuracy. They weren't aimed at the hull, but at the life support venting ports, the coolant manifolds, the vulnerable arteries of our technology. Thwack, thwack, thwack. We were being targeted with the efficiency of a coordinated military force. Brace for direct hull impact. The ship AI screamed warnings. The initial salvo forced us to execute emergency evasive maneuvers, throwing us into a dizzying spiral that threw every sensor reading into chaos. Through the smoke and the residual plasma trails, I finally got a clear look at the figures on the bluff. They weren't savages, they were organized. They wore clothing that, while primitive by our standards, was painted with complex geometric patterns that seemed to shimmer under the harsh lights of our ship. They were coordinating the defense using signals, using rhythm, using sheer disciplined will. I ordered a hard systemic energy pulse, intending to overload their local area shield matrices, a non-lethal deterrent meant to force a withdrawal. The resulting burst of energy washed over the bluff, and the coordinated resistance faltered. The rhythmic drumming stopped abruptly, resonance echoes in working cinchly. The rhythm is a song of aggression, nor is it a lament. It is a deep, resonant chant, a harmony that seems to vibrate not just in the air, but in the very structure of the metal beneath my boots. The sound bypasses our acoustic dampeners. It bypasses our shields. It hits something fundamental, something resonant within the architecture of the Bothister his Delph. My hands instinctively grip the command console, trying to fight against the unnatural vibration. The lights flicker, not from damage, but from sympathetic resonance. The ship groans, a sound of profound structural distress. It feels like the song is rewriting the physics of the vessel. I bark the order to engage the emergency warp jump, a desperation measure, a blind jump to anywhere else. The harvester screams as the jump sequence initiates, tearing through the space-time barrier. The final note of the chant washes over us just as the viewport goes white, ripping us away from the estuary, away from the figures on the bluff. I don't look back. I just stare at the failing diagnostics panel, my mind struggling to reconcile the data. A technologically superior species, defeated not by weaponry but by song. We jumped into a void of nothingness, leaving behind a silence far more profound and far more potent than any battlefield I had ever known. The mission log entry ends there, marked simply, "Encountered anomalous resistance. Recommend complete reassessment of threat assessment paradigms."